this is Benny Ricciardi with Elite Sports Betting, and I'm here with our next video in our Bettor Education series. Today, the topic that we're going to be discussing is going to be closing line value. Now we're going to discuss the topic of closing line value. We're going to start off by talking about what is it, we're going to get into how you can get it, and finally we're going to talk about why it matters to you as a sports bettor. So let's talk about what is closing line value. An opening line is the initial number that's posted by a sports book when they start accepting bets. The closing line, which is what we're going to be interested in here, is the final number offered before the game starts. So in order to get closing line value, we're going to look at the difference between the number that you took a certain bet at and the final number that was being offered out there in the market. If the number that you took was better than the closing number, then you have positive closing line value. If the number that you bet something at was worse than the number that was offered at the closing line, then you would have negative closing line value. So how do you get closing line value? Let's start off by talking about an example here. Let's say you bet $120 on a favorite at minus 120. That would win you $100. Let's say you also bet $100 on an underdog in the same game at plus 120, which would win you $120. So your total outlay on these two bets was $220. Now your return on these two bets is also going to be $220. So you look at the 120 you bet on the favorite at minus 120, that's going to win you $100. So you get your 120 back, you get your $100 that you won, you have a return of $220. You bet $100 on an underdog and you won $120 if that underdog wins, also going to be a return of $220. If you made both of those bets on the same game, then you're talking about $220 worth of bets, 120 on a favorite and 100 on the underdog, and therefore you're going to break even. Now, in reality, this is something that we know doesn't work this way. If you're seeing a favorite at minus 125, there's a good chance you're going to see the underdog at maybe a plus 115 or a plus 110, somewhere in that area. Now, the difference between those two numbers is what we refer to as the hold. That's the profit that a sports book is going to make. So if you take that same example, you bet $120 on a minus 125 favorite, you're not going to win $100. You're going to win like 96. At the same point in time, you bet $100 on, a plus 115 favorite, you're going to win 115. Now we bet that same $220, but in the one example we returned like $216 or so, and in the other example we returned about $215. That means if the favorite wins and we bet both sides, we lost $4 or $5. And if the underdog wins, we also lost $4 or $5. And that's how sports books make their money. Getting closing line value means that you were able to get a number, a better number than what the market ended up offering. So in our example here, if the market ended up offering a minus 125, you might have been able to get into the game at minus 115 or maybe minus 120 as in the first example. And the same thing for an underdog. If if the market is offering plus 115, but you were able to get plus 120 or plus 125, then you were able to beat the market and you wound up with, 5 or 10 cents worth of closing line value at the end of the day. Now, how do you get closing line value? That's basically the way you get it. You have to bet numbers and have the market move in your favor so that the number that you got is better than the final number that the market's offering. Now, there are ways to get it more often, and one of them is the earlier you bet a number, the more of a chance you're going to have to get closing line value as markets become more efficient as it gets closer to the start of a game. If we assume that at the start of a game, all the information is known, every bettor who wanted to take a crack at that line has seen it, and that the closing line is the most efficient market that, the most efficient number that a sports book can come up with, if you were able to bet those numbers earlier before they moved and the movement happened to be in your favor, not against you, that's going to be your best chance to get closing line value. If you're betting a number right before a game starts, by that point in the week or by that point in the day, that number has already gone through a lot of the discovery process and you're probably not going to be getting a better number. You're probably not going to be getting a lot of closing line value on that if you're betting it close to the start time of a game. So remember, the earlier you get in on a bet, the earlier you decide that this number is off, the better a chance you have to get closing line value on it. So why does closing line value matter? It basically matters because it means you made a good bet and you made that good bet at the exact right time when you should have made it. You want to try to get the best number that a market can offer. And like I said, it's not only that you made a good bet, but it's also that you made it at the right time. You took that number before the market moved in a direction where if you took that same bet a couple minutes later or a couple hours later, you wouldn't have got the same payout on it that you would when you took the number at that time. Like we mentioned, the closing line is the efficient result of market discovery. You don't just get to a closing line by accident. The closing line is what happens as the number is shaped, as people bet on it on either side. So therefore, getting closing line value or getting value on that efficient line is how you're going to beat the market long term. If you're consistently getting a higher payout than the market is offering at game time on either side of a bet, then you're going to have a chance to basically cover that hole that a sports book is talking about. Getting closing line value does not guarantee that any individual bet you make is going to win, but but getting it consistently will make you a long-term winner. And that's a concept that I think people need to understand. If you were able to bet the Raiders at even money, and then they wound up becoming a minus 150 favorite, that doesn't mean that they're automatically going to win. They could still lose that game, even though you got the closing line value in your favor. But if you make that same bet over and over and over and over and over again, assuming that the closing markets are efficient, which we do in sports betting, eventually over time, you're going to wind up winning those bets more often than you're going to lose them. And you're going to be getting better payouts than the market did. If it's a minus 150 favorite, the market is saying that this is a team that's likely to win more than 50% of the time. If you bet it at even money, you're going to be getting paid as if it's a team that only wins 50% of the time. That still means that they're going to lose 40 or 50% of those games. 4 out of 10 times, this bet is not going to pay off, even though you got the closing line value on it. But it does mean that those 6 times that it does pay off, you're going to be getting paid more on it than you should be getting paid on it for something that is that likely to happen, according to the closing line. Now, another reason why closing line value, other than the fact that it means that you made a good bet and you're a smart sports bettor, but the other reason why it matters is that it opens the door to concepts like scalping and middling, which can become risk-free opportunities to make profits. Now, a lot of people have probably heard of these terms before, but may not completely understand what they are. So I'm going to kind of give you a quick rundown here. As in any market that's being made, whether we're talking, sports bets or we're talking baseball cards or we're talking, financial stocks, there's always going to be people on both sides of the market. And there are certain people who are going to be able to make bets on both sides of a market that can lock in or almost guarantee themselves a profit. So let me give you an example here with closing line value. And the first example we talked about, a team was minus 120. So if that team is minus 120, the underdog in that game is probably, I don't know, let's say plus 110. We'll say that it's a little bit of a difference there, and that's the hold that the sports book has kept. If that minus 120 line winds up getting bet to, let's say, minus 150, which would be a huge move on that, well, that also means that the underdog is going to get, a little bit of bump on their side. So if you were able to take the favorite at minus 120, the line moves to minus 150. The underdog's line that was at minus 110 now moves to minus 125. Well, now you're going to be able to do what's called scalping, because if you bet a team at minus 120, you can also bet the other side of the market at plus 125. So let's use the example that we did last time. If a team is minus 120, you bet $120 to win 100, which would be a break even of 220 at the end. Now that same $100 though is not paying you plus 120 like it was in the first example we showed. It's paying you plus 125. So if team A wins, you actually break even. If team B wins, you would actually win $5 on that bet. So you could set it up that, no matter which side the game comes to, you can take a small profit out of that, maybe 1% or half of 1% sometimes. But if you're betting big numbers, 1% or half of 1% is going to keep winding up, adding up over time. And remember, what you basically did by scalping, by betting the favorite at one price and betting the underdog at one price, is you guaranteed yourself that you're going to have a winning bet. One of those two bets is going to win, especially in a two-way market. If we're talking about soccer, like a three-way market, ties and all that, completely different layer that you don't want to deal with. But if we're just talking about a regular two-way market, like a point spread market, or even just a money line with only two possible outcomes on it, if you're getting a certain amount of money on one outcome coming and another amount of money on the other outcome coming, and both of those amounts of money are more than the money that you're betting to put in there at the beginning, what you basically did is guaranteed yourself a profit. So you don't even care who wins the game at that point because you're going to make a little bit of money either way on it. And that's basically what scalping is. There are guys out there who basically just do this for a living with their sports betting. They don't bother trying to pick winners. They try to get in on really good numbers. And then when a number moves in the other direction, they bet it in the other side of it so that no matter what happens, they're going to take a small profit away. Now, a lot of these guys are using sophisticated like algorithms and computer betting systems and things like that that are able to make these bets for them without them actually having to sit there and do all the math and search for all the numbers. And these are also guys that are probably betting across multiple sports books because one single book is going to be very conscious of where they put a number so that people can't come in on both sides of them and basically guarantee themselves a profit. That's why you don't normally see these monster moves in lines in most sports, especially some of the bigger ones that a lot of us bet: NBA, MLB, NFL, unless there's some kind of injury situation or something like that winds up happening. Now, the second thing I want to talk about is the concept of middling. Middling is something that we hear people talk about a lot of time. We'll get into live in-game betting in another video, but middling happens a lot when you have live in-game betting as well because the lines will move a lot during the game. But for now, we're just talking about pre-game bets, pre-flop bets, and ways that you can middle. So, for example, let's say that Team A is a 3-point underdog in a football game, right? So you bet Team A and you take the 3 points that the market's giving you there. So Team A +3 at -110. So let's say during the course of the week, for some reason, Team A now becomes the favorite, where you could get Team B to win on the money line straight up at +110. So you can basically figure out that if I bet a certain amount of money, if I bet $110 on Team A at the beginning of the week when they were getting 3 points, at the end of the week, if I bet $100 on Team B, now that they're paying +110, no matter which way that works out, I'm going to end up with $210. So you theoretically have made yourself a risk-free opportunity. If Team A wins the game, well, then you're going to win your bet and you're going to be in a good situation. You're going to, at the very least, break even. But now what you basically did is if Team B wins the game, worst case scenario, you're also going to break even. So this has now become a risk-free bet for you. No matter what happens, you're going to get back at least the $210 that you bet there. But there's also a little bit of a middle there. You bet Team A and they were getting 3 points. So if Team A actually loses this game by exactly 3 points, you're going to push one bet and win the other one. So at exactly 3 points, you're going to give yourself a profit of the $110 that you make off having Team B as the winner. Now, there's also a situation where you could actually hit both sides of those bets. So you have Team A +3 and Team B on the money line. So if Team B wins by 1 point or Team B wins by 2 points, you're going to cash both of those bets. So basically what you did here by middling that number is you guaranteed yourself worst case scenario, Team B wins the game by more than 3 points and you cash that win bet and you lose the first bet you made on Team A. Or Team A wins that game outright and you cash the first bet that you made, which the winnings on that pay for the bet that you made on Team B. So like I said, worst case scenario, you're breaking even here. But if it does hit in that middle, you're giving yourself an opportunity to cash both of those bets and have a big profit on it, or to maybe push one of those bets and cash the other one and still walk away with a profit there. So that's something that is a little bit more of an advanced technique, but it's why closing line value matters. If you're able to get that closing line value, it opens up the opportunity to do things like scalping and middling in there in order to guarantee yourself profit or to give yourself a risk-free way to make a big score by hitting both sides of a bet. Now, I do also want to mention one final thing here. A lot of bettors that are out there, a lot of guys that are doing this, pretty seriously, they trust in their numbers, they trust in their edges, they trust in the side of the game that they put their initial bet in on. So a lot of people don't bother trying to do the scalping or even trying to middle some games at some point, things like, hedging and stuff like that. They just believe that over the course of the long term, if they keep getting in on the right side, they're going to win. And that's basically what we were saying in that last concept right there. Just because you get closing line value on a single individual game doesn't mean you're going to be guaranteed to win that game. Even a -200 favorite is still only saying that that team's going to win that game like 66% of the time. So there's still a 1 out of 3 chance that that team's going to lose that game. So you may have bet something that was 50-50 and it went up to minus 200, which will very rarely ever happen. But if something like that does happen, again, don't start spending that money already, because there's still a 1 in 3 chance you're going to lose. But if I offered you that same bet every day for an entire year, at the end of the year, you better believe that you're going to have a profit based on the money that you bet and the money that you won at the end, because you're going to be winning a bet, 66% of the time. And when you do win that bet, you're going to be getting paid more money than you should be on something that's going to happen that often. And that's really what closing line value is all about. Profitable sports bettors are going to consistently be able to get closing line value. And again, as the sample size of them getting that closing line value becomes bigger and bigger, the profitability that they're going to be able to show is going to become bigger and bigger. So if you take one thing away from this video, concentrate on getting your money in at the best of times, and concentrate on being on the right side of a market that you think is going to move. If you think a number is off, that's really the kind of thing you want to jump on in sports betting, because if you're able to create that closing line value consistently over the long term, you're going to end up being a profitable bettor and have money to spend and be able to have some fun with it. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining us for another edition of A Bettor Education. This is Benny Ricciardi signing off for EliteSportsBetting.com.